So, Mr. Deputy Mayor, did you just see me go from yellow to orange to pink? I'm trying different kerchiefs on my light because Steve got me a lamp and it makes me look like a pumpkin. So I'm putting different.
Good afternoon. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Is there any conflict of interest amongst the council members here tonight? Seeing none, I need the adoption of the published agenda tonight for the special meeting. Need a mover, please? Councillor Guerin and Councillor Bowman, all in favor? It's carried, and we'll go right to the presentation, and we'll go right to Rita. So Rita, when you're ready, go ahead.
Through the chair, good evening to Mayor and Council and those online who are viewing tonight. On behalf of Development Service, it is my pleasure to introduce tonight's presentation. But before we get started, a word on why we were here. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to provide Council with a summary of public and Council feedback, questions, and comments received during the consultation period on the draft climate change adaptation plan between January 14th and February 3rd. To be exact though, consultation on the plan has been occurring since 2019 with the establishment of the external and internal consultation teams, ongoing public feedback forums, engagement and educational opportunities, social media promotions, and quarterly reports to Council. Council was provided with a soft introduction to the draft plan, its layout, and its content at a special meeting on January 13th this year. But as you will see tonight, the draft plan has largely remained unchanged since the plan addresses the majority of comments received during the public consultation period. The plan has, however, been revised with minor edits to clean some things up, as well as to insert a new graphic to depict our reporting structure for progress on action items. Following tonight's consultation summary, we will distribute Council with a final copy of the plan to have this week in advance of next Tuesday's regular Council meeting on February 16th, where we will be seeking Council's official adoption of the plan. So without further ado, Mr. Mayor, I have Ms. Naharka Banduro, who will speak to the public comments in a formal presentation.
Thank you, Rita.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, everyone, and thank you once again for this opportunity to present with you information on this very important climate change adaptation plan. Thank you, Rita, for the introduction. If the clerk's office can allow me, I'd like to take over the reins on the presentation so I can show them and go through the presentation as it is on my screen.
Through you, Mr. Chair, Niharika, you should be able to do that now.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So following our meeting on January 13th, where the draft climate change adaptation plan was first presented to council members, we today are going to be addressing the feedback in terms of various comments and themes that we received since then. On January 13th, we supported the presented document with an explanation of the various components and the layout of the plan. Following that meeting, we opened up the draft document to public consultation. A feedback form was published and promoted on on the town website, and we also advertised and promoted via a press release, various social media platforms, various news ads, and our ongoing email subscriber list that we had promoted at the start of 2019 as to the residents and stakeholders of the town of Essex that they could subscribe to for the latest news and updates on the climate change adaptation plan development process. Sir, just as a reminder, we also conducted public consultations throughout the development of this document, which we will continue to highlight further into our meeting tonight. So through this feedback form that we had published on the website following the council meeting on January 13th, we received responses from 10 individuals. Since feedback was pretty comprehensive and tended to have questions and suggestions pertaining to multiple aspects of the plan and various topics, we categorized these comments and found 16 different themes. At tonight's meeting, we would like to present the questions, comments, suggestions identified through these themes, provide clarifications, and highlight any changes that we made to the climate change adaptation plan since the last meeting. We would also like to state that we received a large amount of consultation throughout the period and support and elaborating on individual resident concerns due to various effects of climate change. And we would like to address any such, at tonight's meeting, essentially the feedback will be assisted via clarifications on our end. So the template for tonight's meeting essentially will be me reading out the theme and then going to show you where on the plan. So I will toggle between screens. I will toggle between this presentation and the draft climate change adaptation plan and point to the aspects and the components of the plan that address those specific questions or clarifications. Where it's more of a question of the development process and future consultation related questions, we would be addressing those orally. So moving ahead, I'd like to start addressing the themes and the questions that were, the questions that came up with regards to these various themes. So the first theme was to bring more attention to incentive programs. We noticed that there were questions about what kind of subsidy and incentive programs we would be providing within the climate change adaptation plan. How many incentive programs we will be providing, and in general, this question received a generous amount of support. So I'd like to now move onto the plan itself and show you the action items within the plan that address this question. So we'll first go to page number 26 under community. This is a community engagement and partnership objective, which is to encourage the preservation of the natural environment and support the adoption of nature-based solutions. The action item here speaks to the promotion of conservation land tax incentives to encourage long-term private stewardship of natural areas. So the idea behind this action item is to bring attention to available regional and provincial and federal level incentive programs that target private landowners that have natural heritage features. We noticed during the course of development of this program that there were a lot of incentives and subsidy programs that already exist that people often don't have the information on. So we would promote the conservation land tax incentives during pre-consultation phases to property owners. On the next page, under minimizing risk to private buildings and property under the same objective of community engagement and community engagement and partnership. We would want to advocate to county leadership for incentive programs directed towards climate mitigation and adaptation across all levels. And by across all levels, we're talking about residents, we're talking about climate adaptation and mitigation plan projects, seeking incentives on the municipality level as well. On the same page, under supporting opportunities for investment into adaptation-based innovation for local business, we want to augment agritourism strategies to promote and support on-farm diversified uses. Now, this is an action item that recently got implemented as far as the timeline is concerned. And we are in the initial stages of developing research. What we will be doing is promoting on-farm diversified uses of business owners, of agricultural landowners, and promote grants and incentive programs that exist through agritourism and promote these to business owners. On page 29, we would be, sorry. This is further down, which is, yes. On page 32, under corporate objectives, where we will be building and strengthening the town's infrastructure resilience, we will be developing a rain barrel subsidy program. Now, rain barrel subsidy programs are intended to target rainwater harvesting, reducing excess water from flowing into municipal drainage infrastructure, and also usage of excess water on on-site natural features like rain gardens and butterfly gardens, etc. We would also be looking to on page number 32, page number 29. We are also looking to, under promoting community engagement and participation in climate change awareness and adaptation opportunities, we will also be investigating options to develop tree distribution and low-cost purchase programs for residents. The intention behind this is to promote green coverage on private property and residential property. So with that, I'd like to toggle back to the second item or the second theme on our public feedback presentation. There was a comment about expanding on cost estimates. So as you may have noticed on the climate change adaptation plan, we have identified basically the costs of various action items by using the single dollar or double dollar or triple dollar symbols, and also a dashed line, which basically is a legend for items that will be incorporated within the current operating and capital budget. So what we've done is that we provided ranges of cost values and allotted them to each symbolic, each dollar symbol. So single dollar value ranges between $0 to $25,000, a double dollar symbol values for $25,000 to $50,000, a triple digit symbol value is over $50,000 in cost. So they've been estimated in the ranges that have been stated here. And these costs are based on supplementary additions to the annual operating or capital budgets. In terms of providing specific dollar values to each action item, I'd like to go into the intent behind and the myriad of different action items that we do have here. So all of the ones that have been identified by a dashed line, we intend that these action items will be carried out, they're absorbed into the current budget or are expected to be absorbed into the ongoing operated budget based on historical usage, and also action items like including climate change information when providing advisories on town communication platforms, and developing a checklist for event organizers. They're absorbed into the current job descriptions of staff. So that's why we've identified that with a dashed line. For action items that have been denoted by a dollar symbol, management has provided these estimates in the price in the form of price ranges at this time, owing to the fact that we expect that we will get a better idea of these action items and how much they will cost as we go further into the implementation of this plan. The feasibility and the cost benefit assessment of each action item that have been denoted by dollar values are within the scope of that action item itself. So council will be presented with separate budgets for action items that will require additional funding. And at the time, they will be seeking approval for these additional costs. So with that, I'd like to move on to number 3 on our climate feedback themes. There was a question about providing more information on accountability and further developing the reporting provisions that we have on this plan. So the question arose that how are we going to make sure that stakeholders, that residents are able to follow with the progress of this plan, and how it is that administration will be reporting to council on the implementation of this plan. So we noticed that while we had identified this under the implementation, monitoring, and review segment of this plan, we needed to do a better job of highlighting how exactly we did that. So while we stated that administration will be delivering an annual report to town council, which will highlight the actions that have been initiated, what we've done is now we've introduced this monitoring progress workflow. And essentially what it states is that following the adoption of this plan and direction to administration to implement the action items identified in this plan, the various town departments will start implementing the action items. Individual divisions under each department will present quarterly updates on progress of Climate Ready to department directors, and all of the departments will forward progress report to development services, which we've identified as the lead on this climate change adaptation plan. An annual report on all of the progress made by all of the departments will be accumulated and culminated by development services, and it will be collectively presented to council by development services on an annual basis. Now, this will also be made publicly available, as it will be published on the town's agenda for various council meetings, and at the time will be open to public consultation as well. So moving on, a fourth question that had come up was the extent of the involvement of ELK Energy on this important matter of climate adaptation and mitigation. So we'd like to clarify, since there's, I would just orally speak to this. ELK Energy were approached to participate in the Essex Climate Adaptation team early in 2020 when we were creating the various committees, at which time they stated that they were unable to participate. However, during the vulnerability and risk assessment stage of the development of this plan, which was a couple months after the creation of ECAT, Elk Energy was sent a request for input on the assessment process. After receiving responses from them on this vulnerability and risk assessment process and further conversations with them, the outcome from their data was that the vulnerability and risk to Elk's operations from climate impacts were relatively low. While threats to infrastructure were identified, Elk responded that their functionality is not likely to considerably worsen in comparison to assessments with other internal departments, that response resources were within their capability to manage on average, and that their overall risk ratings were deemed relatively low. However, Elk Energy are contributors to the Essex County Regional Energy Plan. Now, since this is an adaptation plan, we are speaking to reducing the damages that climate change will cause in the region. However, when it comes to the question of reducing emissions and reducing energy usage and reducing the stress of energy using on our current utility-based infrastructure, that is being taken care of through the regional energy plan, and that is something that the town of Essex has invested into along with our sister municipalities. ELK is providing current energy consumption usage data to determine how emissions and energy usage can be lowered within the town of Essex. So the fifth theme that was identified was the declaration of a climate change emergency. Now, this was a question that did come up a few times. So to speak to that, I'd like to toggle back to the climate change adaptation plan, where one of the action items that we did identify under a corporate objective is to consider declaring a town-wide climate emergency to be in line with county and federal climate action interests. So with respect to that, we will be bringing forth a recommendation to Town Council on February 16th council meeting to declare a climate emergency at the time. So moving back to the presentation for today, the sixth theme that was identified was on the topic of public consultation. We received a few questions about the timeline of public consultation, and I'd definitely like to clarify that today. Throughout the process of the development of the climate change adaptation plan, we regarded public consultation as a very integral part of the planning process, because climate change very much impacts every single resident and stakeholder within this town. Starting with the development of the Essex Climate Adaptation Team in early 2020, where we invited everybody across the municipality and the region to apply to be a part of the team. We put out public notices through the form of press and media releases. We promoted the creation of the Essex Climate Adaptation Team, and consultation, even after the confirmation of the 14 members of the ECAT, consultation occurred via a public feedback form that was available on the website throughout 2020, right up to recently when we published the draft climate plan. We also put forth various educational and engagement opportunities, such as a climate vulnerability and risk exercise. And we did receive feedback from members on that, from residents and the general public on that aspect as well. So, however, for future consultations, what we will be making all of the progress reports available on an ongoing basis through our engagement opportunities and educational opportunities that will continue to be a vital part of this adaptation plan, and has already been identified as a as I go back to the plan here, we've identified conducting outreach and education campaigns with partners to encourage climate change awareness. This would be a very hands-on approach to being in touch with the public and seeking their feedback and seeking their input on how they're impacted. So we will continue doing that as well. And we'd like to remind everyone that this is a plan that in general, we've made it so that it is flexible in the sense that we want to make it available for future opportunities. Climate change and climate adaptation is a dynamic and constantly evolving process, and we understand that new problems and new solutions to those problems arise on a constant basis. So the wording and the plan has been such that we're able to incorporate and be flexible enough to incorporate various suggestions from stakeholders even after the adoption of this plan, and consider those at the various levels of administration as well. So I'll move on to number 7 of the themes on public feedback, which is addressing the diversity of various town centers and rural communities in adapting to adaptation planning. So this is a very good question. Essex, the town of Essex, the municipality of Essex is not just the Essex urban center. It involves Colchester, Harrow, McGregor, the rural areas as well. And we were very sensitive to this right from the get-go, which is why on the climate change adaptation team, we had farmers, residents, and workers from within the municipality and across the various different regions. When we created and we researched the climate projections and impacts were researched, we made sure that we generated research data and impact data exclusive to the shoreline, which were not going to be mixed in with the impacts that are going to occur and continue to occur in the urban centers. And that's why we made sure that the representation in the ECAT was diverse and consisted of members from across all of the municipality centers and rural communities. The next question, number 8, increased need for biking infrastructure and services in Colchester. So there is a lot of interest in active transportation. And to that, I'd like to flip back to the climate adaptation plan. And like to highlight the portion where, sorry, I'd like to move to page number 25. Right, so on action number 1.3, so this was about development of biking infrastructure, even when it came to storm shelters, water filling stations, etc. So we did identify that we will be developing natural and constructed shade and water filling stations on public property, so parks, seawalls, community centers, splash pads, and encourage the same on private property. I'd also like to speak to the county-wide active transportation system, or CWATS, which is currently in place and geared to promote active transportation infrastructure throughout the county's municipalities. So, several infrastructure addition and upgrade projects are currently underway, which incorporate all of the active transportation needs. The next question, there were some questions and suggestions regarding site level solutions. So residential property owners asking about rain barrel subsidy programs and allowing storage of rainwater and gray water on residential lots and to be used to flush toilets. So I'll answer both of those concurrently. So we are, as you may know from me just bringing it up a little while ago, under the objective of building and strengthening the town's infrastructure resilience, we are going to be developing a rain barrel subsidy program. Through a thorough investigation of existing rain barrel subsidy programs will be completed, including those in neighboring municipalities. In speaking to the storage allowance of rainwater and gray water in residential lots, we did have ECAT and ICAT members bring on-site water storage as an action item as a possible solution to overland flooding. It was determined at the time that this was too large a project to give a green flag to right away without careful consideration. So through the investigation of a storm sewer surcharge, which is highlighted as an action item, we will be able to determine if lot level storage could be a possibility in the future. So I'll move on to the next bit, Number 10, so we had various different suggestions for town initiatives. Clearly, there was a lot of interest in the various different ways we can engage community, and also smaller action items about composting and several different questions on waste collection. So I'd like to quickly address those. There were questions about composting, pickup, and drop-off options. Right now, the solid waste management comes under the authority of the EWSWA. And they are currently developing a green bin or organic or composting program for the city of Windsor, and have yet to announce their plans for the rest of the region. However, we do have a drop-off point at the town landfill. There was a question about implementing a single-use plastics ban. On the federal level, the federal government will be implementing a single-use plastics ban by the end of this year, and that should be countrywide. There were questions about community cleanup projects and how that can be a part of an engagement opportunity. Our community services department has already been conducting several cleanup projects, which unfortunately had to be paused because of COVID-19 this year. There were questions about community tree planting projects. We also do several of those. A lot of those couldn't be implemented due to COVID-19 restrictions this year, and we will continue to expand tree planting projects as we've identified in the adaptation plan as well. There was a question about imposing littering fines for individuals and businesses. That is a question that would concern bylaws, and also, has to be addressed at a higher level, maybe a question for council. However, littering doesn't come within the scope of climate change adaptation. We are looking at infrastructure issues. We're looking at higher level community issues. So with respect to that, we would defer littering questions to either the Solid Waste Authority or bylaw enforcement in the region. Eliminating the use of Roundup on town-owned green spaces. We currently use a horticultural vinegar, which is already organic, and we don't use Roundup on town-owned green spaces. And planting native plant species in public parks and gardens. We have the town already has a tree bylaw, which and also follows ERCA guidelines on the usage and planting of native species. So we already follow that within the town. And there were some suggestions about community educational and engagement program topics. Like identified earlier, our mandate is to essentially have further community engagement opportunities. Just quickly go back, we have several. We conducting outreach and educational campaigns, and these suggestions will definitely be forwarded to the department that would be in charge of educational and engagement opportunities, as they're very good ideas. There was a specific question about, so another thing I'd like to highlight is that we received comments right up until this afternoon, and we've incorporated as many as possible in this presentation, and any that haven't been identified on this, I will address before ending my presentation. There was a specific question about altering drainage practices to reduce loss of water and runoff in fields. So the concern was that it was in regard to keeping water flowing freely and without restriction in fields and ditches of various sizes, which helps with the large rainfalls to help get water away from the fields, and it's also true for local subdivisions as we continue to see increased impermeable surfaces. So this is a concern regarding to reduce loss of water and runoff in fields. So in response to that, we'd like to say that the initiatives identified in this adaptation plan were selected with great consideration for stormwater impacts from climate change, including both rural and urban drainage. The initiatives, in partnership with engineering best practices, were created to improve drainage across the entire municipality and reduce the risk of flooding and the impacts on town residents and property owners. Concerns such as increased imperviousness of developed land are addressed regionally by using the guidelines set out in the 2018 Windsor-Essex Regional Stormwater Management Guidelines. These new standards, which have been recently adopted by Council, address the increased stormwater runoff created by new developments by implementing regional standards that help decrease flooding, erosion, pollution, and encourages low impact development. Further to that, we would also like to highlight that we have identified the incorporation of low impact development practices within our plan, and to establish further low impact development practices and higher building standards through the current updating process that Development Standards Manual is going through. We're also going to be revising the official plan, and we'll continue to incorporate suggestions and concerns of imperviousness as these documents get updated. So moving on to question number 13, or theme number 13, several we'd identified that this was an ongoing question, which is the absence of initiatives geared towards emissions reductions of fossil fuel usage, clean transportation, etc. So this is an important point of distinction. What we'd like to say and bring to notice again is that this is a climate change adaptation plan. Now, true, there are two main strategies to managing climate risks, so mitigation and adaptation. Mitigation is what focuses towards emissions reductions or actions that are geared towards preventing the emissions in the first place. So that's sustainable transportation, clean energy, energy efficiency, reducing usage, consumption, et cetera, et cetera. That we are addressing through our participation in the regional community energy plan that's being developed by municipalities, the County of Essex, ERCA, et cetera. This document specifically speaks to adaptation. So how can we best address infrastructure upgrades? How can we best address flood protection? How do we look into business continuity? How do we help people regain the quality of life that they have following a climate change related event? So that's why you will see that most of the action items that have been addressed on here focus mostly on adaptation. Some adaptation action items can solve both problems or can reduce the risk of both problems, but the action items identified are adaptation based. We have had content on here. I think the entire section under strategies to manage climate risks will help understand why it is that we chose adaptation. Number 14, we got a comment about the inventory of green spaces, parks, and easements to protect natural areas. So we are going to be able to do that after incorporating Heat Island GIS. So what that means is that we gain access to mapping data that will help us understand where the heat islands are within the community and where there's green spaces. So this will help us incorporate, I'm just trying to find my place here. If you can give me a sec, we have incorporated Heat Island geographic information system information under community and engagement, partnership engagement objective, encourage the preservation of the natural environment, acquire and incorporate Heat Island GIS data into town planning to assess total green spaces, tree canopy, and heat islands in the municipality. Once we have an idea of what spaces are lacking so this is satellite imagery and aerial imagery of the various town spaces and green spaces, and this will help us understand how much tree coverage we have, how many green spaces we have, and this will help us develop that inventory that this question is about. Next, we have a question about phragmite removal, which is a huge concern in our area. Once again, under the same objective, we intend to explore and engage in regional partnership through our leadership to improve various regional environmental quality issues. And one of a primary one would be the development and implementation of controls to prevent the spread of non-native invasive species, which includes phragmites. And lastly, there was a question about the inclusion of Indigenous peoples in the development and consultation of this document. We'd like to say that we very much do value the participation of all groups that are vital to this region and the development and preservation of this region. Members of the Caldwell First Nations were asked to participate in the Essex Climate Adaptation Team application process, as well as approach for input on the vulnerability and risk assessment process. We did not receive any responses on participation. However, through future opportunities on public consultation, we invite everybody, including Indigenous and non-Indigenous members of our community, to continue to provide information and their information pertaining to climate change impacts. So lastly, I'd like to verbally address a question that had come in earlier today concerning the Essex County Federation of Agriculture. We received a comment about possibly extending the consultation period on this document, as they'd like to further consider and review this document and work with their provincial partners on coming up with recommendations. We did have a member of the Essex County Federation of Agriculture on the ECAT. And we also had two other farmers on the ECAT, because we wanted to develop a holistic idea of what agricultural practices, how agricultural practices will be impacted from their consultation and throughout the ECAP meetings. We understood that the town cannot, or the town has limitations in terms of what we can do and what we are able to provide assistance on for land use planning and on-farm practices. What we were advised to do is provide more in terms of support, business support, more in terms of educational opportunities, more in terms of grant provisions, and support farming practices in general. So at this time, I'd like to ask Rita to further expand on this issue. So Rita, if you'd like to speak to it.
Thank you, Naharka. So through the chair, as Naharka was noting, we received this comment this afternoon, and as she noted, we had 3 representatives from the agricultural industry on the ECAT. It was extremely vital for us to have adequate representation from our agricultural sector, because a large part of our land base is agricultural. It's about 80%. So from those conversations, as Naharka noted, it was clear that our action items should really focus with respects to agriculture on promotion, on even helping out with rural infrastructure that serve the agricultural industry, so such as drainage. And we've listened and we've done that by including as an action item the investigation of a buffer strip, by including agritourism strategy as an action item under development services, and by assisting with the promotion of any projects, any grants that may come down from such provincial ministries such as OMAFRA as well, promoting that to our local agricultural industry. I also want to note that the plan is flexible enough to incorporate suggestions from the Essex County Federation of Agriculture long after the plan is actually adopted. It's actually flexible to incorporate any comments we receive from organizations and individuals. Comments can fit under any 4 of the themes that we've identified in the plan, being policy, being process, being infrastructure, being communications. So there's always that opportunity as well.
Rita, if I may just ask you a question. I know there was a concern from the Federation on, I spoke to you on this issue just before the meeting, tree cutting bylaw. Can you speak on that?
So through the chair, I believe that action item was, I believe Naharka can speak a little bit about the actual verbiage relating to that action item. So I can better speak to what the town's involvement or what administration's involvement is going to be. So if Naharka, you can bring that up on the screen.
Certainly. Through you, Mr. Mayor. So the question about the tree cutting bylaw. It's under the community engagement and partnership objective number 2, which is encouraging the preservation of the natural environment and supporting the adoption of nature-based solutions. So this is further under the heading of exploring and engaging in regional partnerships to improve various regional environmental quality issues, participating in regional efforts to developing a tree cutting bylaw. So the idea here was to participate as leadership in regional conversations about tree cutting bylaws. We are not making any decisions at this point. The idea is to be a part of conversations and to be a part of any regional, so currently identified, but through the creation of this adaptation plan, we understood that certain items and certain possibilities and opportunities were within the radar of this field, of this topic. And we identified that we would like to participate in these efforts to essentially create more green coverage that's an effective way to adapt to climate change as well as mitigate the climate change. However, we're not making any decisions, any firm decisions, and this will not necessarily be at the town level. And the idea at this point is just to participate as leadership and then put forth any of our concerns and comments with any regional level conversations, be it with IRCA, be it with other natural landowner authorities.
Yeah, this issue was brought forward by Deputy Mayor Malash. He had a call from one of the members of the Federation, and I guess there was a concern amongst the members of the Federation that they're going to be told, the way I read it, they were going to be told either they can cut trees or they can't cut trees. And I think this is a big issue. I think we went through this before years ago by restricting or coming out with a policy on a tree cutting bylaw. So I just don't want something like this to hold up this climate control adoption. But I mean, it is a concern, and I think the farm industry is concerned about this issue. So I want to make sure that that's clear. Any other questions from council?
Mr. Mayor, I don't know if you can see my hand or my picture.
Yeah, I can see it. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. So just a question to Niharika. If so, this evening, first of all, I think if the Essex County Federation of Agriculture wants to discuss this draft plan with the Ontario Federation of Agriculture to determine if there's other areas of the province that have already adopted a plan, whether there were some concerns or their involvement in other municipalities' plans, that perhaps they can offer some advice. I believe that we should give them the time to be able to review and offer us their expertise. That's what we were looking for by going out and asking various members of the community from different organizations or different aspects of the community to help us out in this report. So I don't think that we're asking for this report to be finalized this evening. I didn't really see that on the, so as long as we've got this open, how soon are you looking to try and have this finalized? I think Rita has her hand up. So I'll ask Ms.
Yeah,
Jabor.
Rita, go ahead.
Through the chair, we're hoping to have this finalized for February 16th, which is your next regular council meeting. So as I emphasized earlier, the plan is flexible enough to incorporate suggestions at any time from the time of adoption, from members of ECFA, from members of any other organization and residents. We will continue to accept recommendations and comments and incorporate them accordingly into any of those 4 themes.
And before follow up, Mr. Mayor?
No, go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So as far as when Essex County Federation of Agriculture comes back with their, if something's different administration will bring that back to council for us to review. Not just make a determination that we don't want to make the change. It would actually come before us for review.
Through the chair, to Deputy Mayor Malash, will provide council with updates on the plan, on progress on the plan, and any comments we receive on the plan.
Okay, and further, we wouldn't be trying to push a tree policy or anything agriculturally related in the immediate future. Because the timeline I think that they were asking for was to wait till April before anything was passed.
Well, go ahead, Rita, or who's going to answer this one?
I have the answer.
Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So the idea for these specific action items was to identify, not to push it exactly through the municipality of Essex, but to be a part of regional efforts. And we've identified the timeline as ongoing for the tree cutting, the tree cutting bylaw and the control of invasive species and the improvement of Lake Erie water health, because these are ongoing efforts. We're not looking to implement a tree cutting. That is not to implement the tree cutting bylaw, isn't within the direct mandate of the climate change adaptation plan. It depends on, again, consultations. It depends on how things develop throughout the course of the next 5 years.
Okay, thank you very much.
Anybody else from council? Councillor Bondi, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really like the amount of public consultation we've had. I really feel like out of everything we've done, this is probably something where I've seen the most opportunity for council members, members of the public to have public consultation. And I'm probably one of the most critical of public consultation. So I want to say good job to everybody getting public consultation on this file. I do have a question, and I'm not even sure who can answer it here, but how many, our email subscription list, how many residents have subscribed to our email subscription list? Like how many did we push that out? That's my only question tonight. And I just want to thank everybody for their work. And I'm still processing some of the new feedback. So really good team effort here. Thank you.
Thank you. And who can answer that? Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Bondi, for your feedback and your compliments. We specifically created a subscriber or an email list just for people who wanted to receive feedback on the climate change adaptation plan. It was all of the residents of Essex that applied to be on the ECAT, but didn't make it. But in addition to that, we also, while we were promoting the ECAT at the very beginning, we also had members, emails from various residents being asked to put on the list. So approximately, I'd say we had around 30 people. But that is just a rough figure. And we also pushed it through social media. So some people we continue to get feedback from. However, the metric we're using just for the sake of today's presentation is just the feedback form.
Anybody else from council? Councillor Van Undolen, go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, through you, I've been complaining for a year about the vagueness on costs and the effect on our lives and our town and our lifestyle with this. And tonight, on supposedly the last night of consultation, we finally get some vague numbers that those mysterious dollar signs. If there was one, it meant this much. If there was two, it meant that much. And we're supposed to maybe approve it tonight. Now I'm hearing, we get 8 more days. Yippee. I want to go back and add up what the supposed costs of some of these things are, because this is the first time after a year of this is the first we're hearing of potential costs. I mean, that alone is a reason not to proceed with a quick approval of this, much less the farmers wanting to have more input. I think they're finally realizing how far-reaching and how potentially devastating passing this could be. I mean, talk about far-reaching. I mean, there's no aspect of our lives that will be untouched from this, and I don't think we should be rushing into this. The tree bylaw alone would be normally a matter of weeks, if not months of debate, because so many people will have an opinion on this. This is potentially life altering, economy altering, and we don't have enough information about it. And I don't believe this stuff. Oh, we can go back and change it later. No. I don't believe that for a second. I would warn residents, if you didn't like the COVID lockdown, you ain't seen nothing yet. This thing is really going to change your life. I think we need more time.
Or anybody else from council? Seeing none, thank you very, very much for the presentation. It was a good presentation. I think there's been a couple issues on the presentation that come out, which is good. It's good to have conversation and good dialogue. So anyways, I need a motion to accept the presentation, please. Motion. Deputy Mayor Malash, seconder. Councillor Guerin, any further questions? All in favor? It's carried. Thank you very much for the presentation. It's a good presentation. I guess that's it, eh? I guess that's everything for this afternoon. So it was a short meeting, and I want to thank all council for their input. And I need a motion to adjourn. Councillor Bjorkman and Councillor Van den Dolen. All in favor? Carried. Have a great evening, council.